Welcome to Lawyers Coach. My name is Oliver Hansard, and each episode of this podcast will feature myself or Claire Rayson, both of us coaches and former lawyers, trying to find out what makes lawyers tick. We'll be hearing from various guests and experts, and then at the end of each episode, we will both be reflecting on what they said. Natalie Murray is a lawyer looking to do things differently. She created Lawbox to bring a new concept of legal service delivery to the most regulated of industries. Natalie is part of the legal design movement that's shaking up the legal sector. Legal design is the process of applying design thinking to complex legal problems. It helps make the law more accessible and easier to understand for its intended audience. All of this was up for discussion when she spoke to Claire, but Natalie started by revealing why she became a lawyer in the first place.
Wow, that is a good one, actually. My mum made me do it. I'm going to just say that. It was one of those professions I think was a proper job, and she thought it was going to be wonderful for me. And actually, when I was little, I liked the idea of being in court. So Ali McBeal was a big influence, and I thought it was a great idea to stand up and plead a case in court. The reality of that is somewhat different, particularly if you're not a litigator, which I'm not. But yeah, I think it stems from when I was about 10 or so, and very little.
So you've obviously enjoyed being a lawyer, and I know that you moved from being in private practice to being a legal consultant. So I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, of course. So I enjoyed my time in private practice, and of course I did all of my training there, and met some of my really good friends who are also lawyers through that. But I think it comes, there's a point where you are either headed towards partnership and on the ladder to kind of towards partnership, or you find something else. And I think for me at that stage, I decided that the something else was for me. So I thought there might be something else out there. At the stage that I was in the firm, I began to work with clients directly. So I would go into their office and work with them. And I quite enjoyed that. So it was leading me towards a more in-house commercial approach as a lawyer, which I think ultimately then takes you to this consultancy or consultant model that I am in currently.
You just mentioned there some of the benefits to the client of being a consultant. But in terms of kind of perhaps many people now working from home, thinking about the future and what that might look like for them, what's being a consultant been like for people that might be sitting there thinking about making the leap to become a consultant?
It's wonderful and scary all at the same time. So it's great because you get to be yourself as a lawyer. There's no one, whilst we all have the law societies or the SRA's rules to comply with, and we are lawyers by trade, actually, you can put your own feel on the job, your own stance. So that's quite nice. The tougher side of things, the scary side, I suppose, is that you are on your own. And you are a consultant. And although you surround yourself with other consultants and friends, perhaps in the same field, really the idea is you're at your desk on your own. So I do miss the camaraderie of a busy legal team. But actually, I'm quite involved in some of my clients' in-house legal teams. So I get it from that side.
And you mentioned scary, and I think there's probably nothing scarier than setting up your own practice, your own firm. And I know that you've done that. So I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about what made you decide to set up Lawbox.
Yeah, so I suppose it goes back to the fact, and I always say this, I never wanted to start my own legal practice. Having worked as a risk compliance person at my old firm, I knew all of the things that I had to, all the boxes I needed to tick, let's just say that, in the compliance side of things. But actually, as a consultant, I was doing much of what I needed to do anyway. So the idea of setting up an actual practice, although it seemed quite frightening, it wasn't so bad in the end. And I quite enjoy actually the idea of creating a brand, and the colours and all of that stuff that goes with having your own, that's the fun side of having your own business. So yeah, I mean, that's really where it came from. We were doing the job anyway, and I just decided to sort of make sure I branded it up. But apart from that, it wasn't very much different from being a consultant in the first place.
So I wonder if you can tell me a bit about Lawbox. I know that one of the challenges that all firms have is how they can deliver legal services differently. And I know that's something that you're very passionate about. So I wonder if you could tell me a little bit about how you do that.
Yes, of course. So it does stem back from to the time that I was in private practice. And I sort of did things a bit differently to others. So whilst I was running a transaction or a finance transaction or something similar, I would sort of map out what it would look like on paper. And I'd always have it surrounding me so I could see it visually. And that informed how I actually practiced in my field. So in setting up Lawbox, design was always going to be a huge part of it, because that's really my bread and butter. That's where I came from. It's the bit I enjoy. So we take the concept of design and we mix it up with what we need to know as lawyers and how we practice, and we try to do something that's a little bit different. So it's much more client friendly in its approach. We take a bit more of a commercial approach than I think standard law firms do. And the thing that people will notice, I suppose, the most is it looks different. So we try to make sure agreements are easy to read. You know, I wouldn't suggest that people jump at reading a legal agreement, but actually I think ours is quite striking. And people, you know, want to read the terms rather than trying to avoid them.
And legal design is something that I think, you know, is starting to wake people up, because I think that it does touch on the customer, as you've said, and it also brings a different thought process to the law. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of the design thinking and what that means and what that looks like in practice?
Legal design in its simplest form is taking the design-based approach. So when you speak to clients and you really figure out what it is they're trying to achieve, and you add the legal element to that. So what we essentially get is if we're suggesting that we're going to put together a set of terms of business, it's not just your standard set of terms. It's those that we've worked with the client on. We've managed to get to know their business. We've got to know what they're trying to achieve with these terms, and we put them together in that way. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's pretty and has pictures, but actually the purpose of the document is there for a reason, and for good reason, and we've worked with the client on that basis. That the fun part of legal design is that we get to then play around with the imagery and what it actually looks like, and that means we get to move around some words, we get to put some pictures in, and we get to make it look as though it's something someone wants to read.
And I know that you work with tech clients, you work with regulatory clients. How do they receive legal design?
So they really like it. And the reason for that is particularly with tech clients, is they're always trying to do new and exciting things. And everything they do challenges the norm. So when they come to their lawyer and they ask for any of the commercial agreements or terms or contracts that need to be put in place, as with everything else, I think they find it very refreshing that we don't just go back to basics and give them a standard set of agreements. I think for them, it's refreshing to know that we learn about their business. I wouldn't suggest I'm techie at all, but I have learned about it recently and in many ways, and I can apply it to my legal knowledge. So it gives me a foundation of knowledge about what the client does, as well as adding to that the legal knowledge that I bring to the table.
And how do your regulatory clients receive it? Because I know with tech, as you've mentioned, it's an industry that's fast moving, that's innovative. Regulation and creativity are perhaps two words that you don't always hear together. So what do your regulatory clients make of it?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because regulation can be quite stiff and the rules are there and we just have to comply with them. You can take finance agreements as an example of that, in that there are some heavy regulations that apply to how they look like, or how they look, and what sort of wording we have to put in there for the benefit of the customers. So there's not a great deal we can do to change things, because the regulations are quite strict on that. But actually it's applying the design thinking behind what they're trying to do, and that's really taking what they're trying to do in providing this product to a customer and going through a process by which we then decide what's the best route for that customer. So whilst we might not be able to change maybe the look and feel of a finance agreement, we can change certain of the customer and business processes that sit behind that then support a better sort of understanding from the client's perspective, but also a better outcome for the customer.
And it seems to me that, you know, what it does perhaps is kind of brings into focus your customer's customer, which I think sometimes gets overlooked by lawyers. You kind of work with your client, but you kind of forget that your client also is serving someone else. So how do you go about understanding all the kind of the network that sits, you know, the network that your clients are trying to reach?
Yeah, so I can't promise that doesn't take a lot of time, and it from our side, it certainly involves some commitment, and that's both in terms of time and you know, relationship. So we get to know our clients. You know, we spend some time finding out about their business, asking lots of questions. You know, in the good old days, we might go out for a cup of coffee or something like that, and you know, in asking those questions, getting the answers, we're not afraid to sort of, you know, press on and ask for further information. So that gives us just a knowledge of what they're trying to achieve and actually what the picture looks like. And I think this goes back to the way I used to sort of plan my transactions, in that I set out a kind of time map or time frame, or you know, like in a picture form of what we're looking at, and it helps you, you know, to distinguish the relationships and what each person is trying to achieve and get out of that. And in doing that, I think we sort of see the bigger picture, and that helps then with the client relationship, but it also helps them with their own customer or client relationship, which means that everybody, I suppose, at the end of the day wins.
And is there an element there of, you spoke a bit about the difference between being a consultant and when you were kind of a fee earner inside a firm? Do you think that being a consultant gives you a bit more freedom to kind of build that relationship?
Yeah, I think it does massively, actually, because as a lawyer in a firm, it's very much about the chargeable hour and targets, and you know what your day looks like. And if I didn't hit sort of five or six chargeable hours a day, someone would sort of come up to me and ask me why. So it's always about the fee earning, and I understand why that's the case. And you have to make sure that everybody is doing their work, but it gives you less time to actually do what I would call the non-fee earning parts of your working day, and that's just getting to know your client. As a consultant, your time is more your own. So it fits much nicer. It fits nicely with the fixed fee way that we charge, and it allows you then to give a reasonable fee to the client who knows what it is up front, but actually in that fee we factor in some time to get to know the client. So it's not a case of looking at your clock all the time thinking that the conversation has taken some time. It's actually just having a nice cup of coffee with somebody without the pressure of time recording.
Do you think there's anything else that sort of prevents lawyers building that relationship in a way that you are?
It's difficult. As I sort of remember it, the client relationship is held by the client partner, and they're the person that really maintains it. And it's not like there's a bun fight for these clients, but it's very much the case that if somebody introduces that client to the firm, it's their responsibility and their duty to look after the client, which sometimes gets in the way of everybody else getting to know the client. I'm not suggesting that it's, you know, it's forbidden to speak to them, but it's the way that it's set up with the partner heavy sort of structure is that the people that work underneath an introducing partner tend to just do the work, and with that comes the idea that you've got 2 or 3 hours to get something done and you need to do it and get it out. And of course, once you put in some time to speak to somebody on the phone and then learn about their business and their own customers, you could easily eat into that time by 2 or 3 hours. So it just does, for some reason, it just doesn't work.
And you've moved from, as you know, as we said, from consultant to starting your own firm. So now you're in that position of, you know, having to bring other people on board to work with your clients. You might be working with their clients. What are you doing to create a culture in your firm to make sure that client relationship is really important?
Yeah, so it's quite difficult actually, because, you know, as the person that holds a lot of the client relationships myself, it's quite easy to forget that somebody who works with me won't know the things that I know. So we do try to talk about it. We try to get the clients introduced to the people they're going to work with. But what we try to introduce into the way that we work is a project management sort of system. And what I mean by that is that instead of just focusing on chargeable hours, some of our lawyers, including myself, simply do the project management side of running a matter. And that means that they make sure that everybody knows what they need to know, that we have group calls that perhaps the client isn't charged for, that mean that everybody is up to speed, knows what they need to know in terms of the work that they're trying to do. So I wouldn't suggest we've got all the answers, but we are trying to find our way into making sure that everybody has informed, that they're informed about the work they're actually doing, and they themselves get to know the clients.
And on the consultant side, I know legal design is new and not something yet that is taught in law school. When you're looking for consultants and when you onboard them, how do you explain legal design to them? How do you teach them about it, and what's the reception like?
Yeah, so it's a tricky one, because we're taught in a very different way to the way that legal design encourages us to work. So it can be quite a different topic for lawyers, but I think that once we explain it to them, they sort of understand, and then once we show them practically what that means, and that's both in terms of what maybe a document might look like, or the type of way that we work, which informs our processes, I think they're quite excited by it. The level of lawyers that we work with are of that sort of, they've been doing their work for some time, and I think they're quite excited by this new way of working.
So Natalie, I think with COVID-19, and I don't want to talk too much about the pandemic on this podcast, but it has forced teams to work virtually. It's forced teams to work from home. And obviously, as a consultant, you're probably more used to that setup than most. So what advice would you have for people listening in terms of how to make a virtual team work?
Yeah, it's a tricky one, actually, and it takes a lot of practice. You've just got to keep in touch. You have to have either your morning or afternoon catch-up call, and the applications that are around now are really good for that. It can be quite isolating and lonely working remotely, and that's just on the personal side of things. But actually, when you're used to working in a firm where you can turn around and ask someone a question, it can be difficult if you're used to that to then work from home. So my advice would be, set up a group, like a WhatsApp group, set up some sort of conferencing facility that's really easy to use and everybody can go to, and then set up also some regular time slots for just a catch up. It doesn't have to be work related at all, but just a catch up, so that actually what then happens is your team are used to just jumping on a call and getting to talk about something, or getting to know each other, or how their week has gone, or something like that.
In terms of kind of an extension to that question and tying it back to relationships with clients, I know that at the heart of legal design is that understanding of clients, of being curious and asking questions. Have you found that that's been more difficult in the virtual environment, or again, is it much the same as what you were doing before anyway?
I have found that the way that we've worked recently has meant that it's been easier to get to know clients. So I've had a couple of conference calls, where I've had to really get some information from someone to do a piece of work. And what I've found is that people are they find it easier to share their screens, because they are busy doing that and showing you what they're doing day to day. They're very comfortable actually on screen, which surprised me. And I've managed to get quite a lot of information that way. I think that when we meet face to face, although I obviously prefer that, and it's nicer to meet people, but a lot of the time is taken up with someone sort of sitting in front of you with their laptop closed. But actually, I think over the screen, you open up their office to me, and my office to them, and it seems to have broken down a boundary somewhere, or a barrier, which means that it's much easier, I find, to do that kind of first or second inquiry type call.
Someone I was talking to this week was talking about the difference between the where you do your work and how you do your work, and perhaps goes back to what you were saying in terms of the way you do things differently is really spending much more time getting to know your client at the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think lawyers, are traditionally the ones that, are there to answer the questions. You're almost trained to, have a response when someone's talking to you. And I think that's, can cause problems when you just need to kind of have a conversation with a client, to just sit back and listen to what's been said. Is it something that comes easy to you, or is it something that you've had to train yourself in?
I think it doesn't come easily to lawyers. I think a lot of the background, my training is commercial because of the work I've done in-house. And I think that it comes from there. So you're right, when you're working as a lawyer, you feel like you need to come up with an answer straight away. But in reality, that's not what clients expect. They want you to have a sensible approach to something, and it's quite okay to say to them that you don't understand something about their business. And I think lawyers are sort of, we creep into the area of wanting to know everything, but actually clients know their business far better than we ever could. So engaging with them and finding out the answers to the things that they know is a great use of our time, because actually we can apply the law really well, but they know their business. And when you put all of these things together, I think we do some great work. So it's once you get to that point and you realize that's the case, I think it makes you much more relaxed in your approach to dealing with clients.
And understanding the customer and understanding your customer's business is something that is often talked about. It's the driver to all these client listening programs that firms have. What would you say is the most important thing for you to get to know your client's business?
I think I sort of touched upon it earlier. It's just asking questions, questions all the time, not being afraid to show that you don't know the answer to it. So when I explain something that I know quite well, I can easily cover over the detail or give a very high level of view of it because I know the detail. And it's spotting that when people talk about themselves or their businesses, and that's okay. So I don't mind asking them again or delving into a bit more of the information. And I think I used to feel like I was stupid in not picking it up the first time, or perhaps not making an assumption that I know. But actually it's not about that. It's just being open and honest with them, asking the right questions, listening to their answers, and then asking again if perhaps the client hasn't given me enough information that I need.
And do you think that's something that lawyers should be taught from the beginning? I know it's not currently taught in law schools, but do you think that's something that needs to change?
Yeah, I'm actually a huge believer in that, in the idea that law school doesn't quite teach you how to be a lawyer. So it does the very basics, but when you actually practice, when you're qualified, it's a very different thing. And I do feel actually that the beginning part of the training needs to be revamped and brought a little bit more up to date.
And a question around innovation. So I think, again, innovation is a bit of a buzzword. And I think when you talk about innovation in the legal arena, people tend to think about technology. Legal design seems to me to be something that's filling that innovation void, and it's almost doing it under the radar, perhaps because of the lack of technology involved, and it perhaps doesn't sound as sexy when you talk about thinking versus technology. Do you think legal design is innovation in the legal?
I think it is. And I think we're very scared to just, we always think tech is the way. But actually what legal design does is it takes it back to basics and some very small things like actually phoning your client and giving them an update. For me, I think is innovative. As lawyers, I think we're generally, and you can't really apply it across the board, but we're very good at getting on with the work and traditionally not very good at keeping clients up to date. And that's with timeframes, fees, or anything else. And I think it's perhaps the biggest sort of complaint that law firms get. So innovation doesn't necessarily have to mean tech. It's just looking at the way you do things and asking yourself every day, can I do this better? And if you just apply that to the way that you work, I think that you will become innovative and make tiny little changes sometimes, but for a huge advantage to the client and to yourself.
And when your mum made you do law, did you ever envisage you'd be where you are and with your own firm?
No, not at all. I thought I would be working in London. perhaps, fairly senior in a big tall office. I think I just had the fairy tale picture, what I thought was the fairy tale. And actually I'm a big fan of a journey, so where somebody has traveled throughout their career and where they sort of end up. And I'm not suggesting this is it for me, but it is funny where your road takes you. And I do embrace change and new ideas, so that actually, who knows what the future brings, but hopefully something exciting.
And I know, just kind of a last question, when you talk about a journey, oftentimes people have those kind of pivotal moments on their journey that make a huge difference in terms of the direction that they took. I wonder if you could share with us, a couple of those moments for you on your journey.
Yeah, I think for me, one of them has to be the fact that I had children and I became a mum. And it's not particularly, it was exciting for me, but it's what people do. But I found that I just wanted to be at home a little bit more and have a bit of a better work-life balance. Now, I found actually in running your own business, the work-life balance is worse. It is not better. But somehow the joy in doing what I enjoy doing is it justifies what we're doing, and we're building something for us as a family and for our children. So I think for me, it happened then, where I had to question what I was doing. And it really brought home to me the idea that, if I'm going to work, which I really enjoy doing, I want to enjoy it, not just sort of turn up and clock in and clock out. So for me, it was really having children. It sort of reminded me of the things I like to do.
Thank you so much for your time today, Natalie. It's been really fascinating talking to you, and I've come across legal design because of you, and it's a passion that I can see why you have it, and it's a passion that I'm taking on board as my own now, because I just think it's so powerful.
Thank you. No, it's been lovely to speak to you.
That was Natalie Murray from Lawbox speaking to Claire Rayson, and Claire's with me now. Claire, legal design is a new concept to me. What impact do you think it might have on the legal industry?
Yes, I think legal design could be a game changer for the legal industry. When I was talking to Natalie, what really struck me were the parallels between what legal design does and the things that Nir Golan in episode 3 was saying that GCs want. And for those of you that haven't listened to episode 3, I'd strongly encourage you to do so. And Nir ended that conversation about empathy and saying that empathy would be a game changer for the legal profession, and empathy is absolutely at the heart of legal design. So I think, yes, absolutely, legal design is going to be something that could have a profound impact on the way that lawyers deliver legal services.
It might just be me, Claire, but I'm still really struggling to understand the heart of legal design. Could you explain it in layman's terms for me?
I mean, I think the definition of legal design is that it's applying design thinking principles to the world of law. But what does that mean in reality? What it means is that legal services become more focused on the individuals. It would be making sure that the lawyer is spending lots of time asking questions to understand their clients right from the get-go. I think lawyers would say that they do that anyway, and good lawyers should be doing that anyway, but it's really focusing on that as part of the process. It's part of that how that Nir was talking about. And then it's understanding what you're producing and who's going to be looking at that. And it's making that document accessible to them. So it's about breaking it down. It's about writing in terminology that, the user understands. And, perhaps it's branding those documents rather than, a standard set of terms and conditions that just get, sent out and perhaps that no one reads.
So is this about delivering legal services just not for one's client, but for the client's customers?
Yes, absolutely. I think what it does is it is about making sure that, when you're working on the legal aspects of a transaction or, you're producing legal documentation, you're thinking about the client in a different way. You're thinking about the client's stakeholders.
And isn't that what being a good lawyer is about anyway?
Yeah, and it's, as I said, I think lots of legal design is a good lawyer, and I think lots of, it's interesting that in this series we've spoken to lots of commercial lawyers, and I think good commercial lawyers do a lot of this anyway. Perhaps the additional bit with legal design that good lawyers, perhaps typically don't do is think a bit more about the look and feel of the end product. So, which then becomes part of the experience.
Thanks for sharing that conversation, Claire. I genuinely learned something new.
My pleasure.
I do hope you've enjoyed this episode of The Lawyer's Coach. Thanks very much for listening, and goodbye.
Goodbye.
Lawyer's Coach is brought to you by Client Talk and Hansard Coaching. If you're enjoying this series, please rate us on your podcast provider so that others can find us. If you're a lawyer and would like to take part in Lawyer's Coach, please visit our website lawyercoach.co.uk for further details. And you can also join the conversation on our LinkedIn group Lawyer's Coach. If there are any topics you'd like to hear us discuss, then just get in touch.